UN Women Regional Office for East and Southern Africa is undertaking a 5-day knowledge fair on the UN premises in Nairobi.
This fair responds critically to one question, which is basically, what do we know? We realized that we needed to bring information to the table of policymakers, government elsewhere, so that they know what is exactly the gap between men and women in the country. And one critical element that we've done is the country profile, the gender country profile across the continent, to bring information to the table of decision makers.
The knowledge fair was opened by Mrs. Zainab Hawa Bangura, Director General of the United Nations Office in Nairobi.
So for me, the thing that UN Women is doing basically tells me that's where the future is. Yes. We have to support our women. This fair also affirms the role of UN Women in producing solid gender research and evidence that has been used to build transformative approaches. I therefore encourage you to seek partnership with UN Women on your gender-related studies. They are the specialist agency. They work in all countries. They learn everybody's mistake. They watch people. They work with them.
The DJ of UNON has underlined the necessity for other agencies to integrate into the programming and the model of intervention data that's been cleared by UN Women. The United Nations has spent millions on UN Women to gather that information, and it should not be put to waste. It will rather be necessary to be used for the good of not just the UN, but for government, private sector, and civil society.
Exhibition panels present the different country and regional knowledge interventions and products.
Women's economic empowerment is an important area of UN Women's work in order to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. At the Knowledge Fair, we are showcasing several of the women's economic empowerment knowledge products, and among these is Why Women Earn Less, that is the gender pay gap and labor market inequalities in East and Southern Africa, and also the cost of the gender gap in agricultural productivity in East and Southern Africa countries, that looks at gender inequalities in the agriculture sector.
Through scanning the QR codes printed on every publication panel, visitors can easily access the various knowledge products and full publications at the UN Women website.
Leadership and governance is one of the thematic focus areas of UN Women. We are here at the Knowledge Fair, and we have some publications from our partnerships in collaboration with the regional economic communities, our country offices. You'll find a range of knowledge products from young women's political participation, assessments of electoral processes, as well as how you can achieve gender equality in elections. Women, Peace and Security is another thematic area of UN Women, focusing on women's participation in decision-making, in prevention of conflicts and in response. Here at the Knowledge Fair, we have a number of products. One is an assessment of the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on rural livelihoods of women in Tanzania. We also have a study from Ethiopia and a study on the impact on the environment on women's peace and security. We invite you to come and take a look.
The theme of the fair is generation and use of gender knowledge for transformative development.
So UN Women is really focusing on gender statistics, because without evidence we cannot move towards the SDGs, and specifically SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment. So if you take a look at some of our publications, you'll see information and knowledge that spans the gamut from youth to girls to GBV, all the way to women political participation. You'll have a look at also gender participation in the digital space, gender and climate change and the environmental factors, and the whole spectrum that covers the SDGs.
The Humanitarian and Disaster Risk Reduction Unit within the UN Women East and Southern Africa Office is a critical unit. It plays a very pivotal and life-saving function to the affected women and girls across the region. There is deepening crisis, both climate-induced as well as natural disasters. So in this context, we have developed a number of knowledge products, specifically looking at the crisis in Sudan, most recent in 2023, and very similar to that, but in a different context, the study or the product on Somalia.
Strategic planning and coordination is an important area of our mandate for UN Women. At our knowledge fair, we are showing the status of women at the UN offices here in Nairobi, showing whether we are achieving or not gender parity. That gives a good example, and it's a good tool for countries to repeat the similar kind of knowledge management, documenting best practices in the area of gender parity at the UNCT level.
Knowledge management is one of the critical pillars of UN Women programming and policy response in East and Southern Africa. We anchor our knowledge management work in our regional knowledge management strategy for 2022 and 2025, and we have done various interventions in that particular regard. We welcome you to the Knowledge Fair, where we have profiled all the knowledge management initiatives and interventions we have done within the region for the last 2 years.
The Knowledge Fair enhances the visibility of UN Women as a leader on gender knowledge. It also promotes dialogue on the diverse thematic knowledge interventions that have been undertaken by UN Women in the last 2 years.
I would like to say that I have been able to use some of the products that UN Women has done for the past decade, and I'm really glad that now they've made the products available through the QR code. You can quickly just review some of the publications that are there in different thematic areas. I've particularly been intrigued on the publications where we engage women on the gender pay gap, which I feel that different countries need to review these gaps. So I'm super glad to UN Women, and I hope that other women in different African countries will be able to review these products and hopefully use them meaningfully, even in implementing their policies.
We have a rigorous committee of review of all of the publications that we have. And these publications also point the fingers to exactly where the gaps are in every country. And we have gone also digital to allow people that are paperless people to be able to scan the documentation and to have them readily available.
Ending violence against women and girls in the East African region is one of the focus areas, and some of the knowledge products that we have worked on is one, a multi-country study on women access to justice, and specifically during pandemics like the COVID pandemic. Another area has been some mapping on the work that we are doing on inclusion of disability fraternity in the work that we do.
The overall expected outcome of the Knowledge Fair will be the creation of a strong regional network, positioning UN Women as a knowledge hub on gender equality and women empowerment, and attracting strategic partnerships within the different thematic areas.
In terms of partnering around any violence against women and girls, UN Women has a lead in terms of the gender and data that we are generating to shape the agenda, to shape programming, integration, and to also inform advocacy work. It does make sense to partner with UN Women.